Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Monday evening. Here we are live on Patreon, and we're going to be getting into the show in about 3 minutes. Once that we go live on radio, we will be ready to roll here. This is just the pre-show for those of you who don't know, where we just get set up, make sure all our sound levels are right. And we've got it down now, so we probably don't need 3 minutes. But it's always good to come in and warm everybody up, warm myself up for the show that's coming. So here we are. What should we talk about? We're going to talk more about the Constitution tonight, which I think is vital information for all of us. And let me go over here, make sure we're playing over on Patreon. If you heard that, that's my soon-to-be 14-year-old son. So there we go. There's that. There's that. There's that. That's all playing. Good to know. And so good evening to everybody. Glad you're out there. And we're almost ready to roll. We got about a minute and a half left. And we're ready to roll. Let's see. Boom, boom, boom. There's that. Okay. We're all set to go. So all of you out there, appreciate your being here. Appreciate those of you who have been supporting this effort over on Patreon. It means a lot to me. And thank you. Let's see. I'm just looking for in my notes where we left off on Friday, because we're continuing this same issue we were talking about Friday. We got about 30 seconds left and we go live over on the radio station. I got to make sure I'm where we left off. France, Germany, blah, 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 ratification. All right, we're about ready to go live. Everybody stand by. And here we go. I'm late, so here we go. I'm late in getting the show running. So if you're watching and you're listening over on the radio, guess what? Here's the opener. Stand by.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey folks, happy Monday evening. Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Scotty Roberts, and this is my show, the Intrepid radio program, broadcasting to you on OdysseyRadio.com. That's ODYSY radio.com. It's actually, the full name is Subspace Odyssey Radio, but the website is OdysseyRadio.com. And you can come and watch the video simulcast over on my Patreon channel. And that is patreon.com/Scotty Roberts. You can come on over and see us there. And just a little plug for Patreon. Patreon will cost you a minimum of $4 a month. And you'll get every show that we produce all month long for that price. So I'm going to thank you ahead of time. Take a look at that. And if you'd like to help support this show, there it is. You can come and support it. And let's get into tonight's topic. I started on Friday night, breaking from our tradition of doing a paranormal show on Friday night, because I thought it was very important to talk about the Constitution. And why would we want to talk about the Constitution? because right now in this country, we are facing crises of in our government, crises of the way our government operates, and the people's understanding of what government is supposed to do, how it is supposed to act, has been grossly manipulated and grossly tainted. And I think it's because many of us, many people out there, don't have an understanding of what the federal government is supposed to do versus what the states' governments do. And so I thought it was a very important issue to talk about this tonight. And I don't want I get this fear that people glaze over a bit when you say, oh, we're going to talk about the Constitution of the United States. You know what? This is your country. Hey, Randall Flagg out there, by the way, over in the chat room on Patreon. Good to see you. I don't want people's eyes to glaze over, and they do automatically because they think, oh, this is politics, or oh, this is education. Therefore, it's maybe something I don't want to spend my time. I know enough about the Constitution. Well, what do you know about the Constitution? Is a big question. Did you know that it is our responsibility to resist in this country any effort to subvert the Constitution? Did you know that the President of the United States is supposed to support, he takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution? Did you know that the federal government, which includes the executive branch, the president, the legal branch, which is the um, uh, executive, legislative, I meant, not legal. I threw myself off. That's what I did there. The legislative branch, making the laws, that's your Congress. And then the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court of the United States and anything underneath it, that's federal court. Those are the branches of government. And do you know what we talked about on Friday was who established the federal government? I think many people think that the federal government was what existed and that's always been the power in our country, and that the federal government has unquestionable power over us. But that is not true. What we have to realize, in which they don't teach as strongly as they should, probably in some quarters don't teach at all, is that the Constitution, according to the Constitution, the federal government is subservient to the states' governments. The states have more power than the federal government. And so the federal government, they can make states do what they want by coercing them with federal dollars and things like that and whatever other methods they use. But these are all powers that were given to the federal government when the states established it. There is a general principle here. It'd be like looking at it from a spiritual concept or a religious concept. When God created humans, did he make them greater than himself? No. He was still the supreme ruler. He was God, and the creation was subservient to him. Now take that as kind of a picture of what the Constitution did with our government. Federal government was established by whom? By the states. The states created the Constitution, ratified the Constitution. The states put forward the power in the Constitution for a federal government to be created. So the states created our federal government. The federal government is not more powerful than the states. I'll repeat an illustration I've talked about before, and I used it on Friday night. It's like a year ago when we saw the leak of the Roe v. Wade stuff from the Supreme Court. We saw that happen a year ago. And the Supreme Court, the issue was, with all the caterwauling out there by activists and so on who know better, by the way, that, oh, the Supreme Court of the United States has just taken away women's rights over their bodies. That was the caterwaul. That was the line given. But that's not what happened. The federal government judicial branch, the Supreme Court, said Roe v. Wade and the decision to have an abortion is not a federal issue. That does not fall under the purview of the federal government. That is an issue that needs to be remanded back to the states, which is exactly what they did. They voted to have the issue of abortion put back to the states because the states have the power to make those decisions, not the federal government, because the federal government was never established to make decisions like that for the country. So that took us into our discussion last Friday about what power the federal government does have, who gave it to them, who created the federal government, and what does the federal government do? And the Constitution wasn't ratified by popular vote, by the way, of the people that lived in all those states. They would be a party to the contract if they would. The people of the United States, party to the contract between the states and the establishment of a federal government, if you look at it as a contract. And they were not party. It was ratified by the states, which means the states are the parties in the contract. Now, what's amazing is we knew that back then. And I mentioned this on Friday. This is just a tiny bit of recap. It was Patrick Henry, the one who said, "Give me liberty or give me death," that famous quote of his. He was one of many that was very unhappy about the wording. How dare we start the document, the Constitution of the United States, with the three words, "we the people," when we the people had nothing to do with establishing the federal government. As I'm talking as a corporate body. Of course, it was human beings. It was people that did it. People who were citizens of individual states. But the contract was not with individual parties. It was not with the people of the United States. They had nothing to do with this. And it needs to be read, insisted Patrick Henry, that we the states, not we the people, established this Constitution. And so we had a problem with the wording. So the states are the parties to the compact of the Constitution, the Constitution, the agreement between the states and the establishment of a federal government. It's the states who are the party. And you're going to get pushback on that, but that really means that the Constitution is an agreement between the states and the newly established at the time, the established, created federal government. As there's always people trying to put the states and the federal government on equal footing, but it's not true. That's not how that works. When you create something, you're not created on equal footing. When you are the created thing, the creator created you. In this case, the states were the creator. The creator is always superior to its creation. And so to say that our Constitution is an agreement between the states and the federal government is a temporal impossibility. Because you see, the states ratified the Constitution that created the federal government. So the federal government didn't even exist until the Constitution was ratified. So in legal terms, the federal government is the product of the contract. You cannot be a party to the contract if you are the product of the contract. You see? There is no equal footing between the federal government and the states. The states created the federal government, not to be more powerful than they are, but they gave them temporary delegated duties. Temporary meaning it's not stated that way, but it's saying we are appointing this We're creating this federal government to do these certain things, and we can take away that power if we want to. You can't sign a contract into legal being if you do not exist until it's signed. So when our states created the federal government, they created a limited federal government because you can't live in liberty in absolute governmental authority. More power in government, less liberty in the people. More liberty in the people, less power in the government. So, how did they create the limited government? They did so by specifically enumerating its powers. If it is not listed, and here's the important point, folks, if it's not listed in the Constitution specifically, it does not rest as an authority in the federal government. And then the states did the most important thing they could have ever done. They reserved all power to themselves. The natural question comes, what power went where? What power stayed where? Is there any power that's not delegated anywhere, sort of floating around in the ether, waiting for somebody to grab it and use it? Because that's what the Supreme Court and the politicians want you to think, that you know there's certain powers that are just sort of floating around in the ether. And so they have to develop and devise and divine some magic language to put it into federal authority, like environmental protection, healthcare. These are all things that were created that are saying the federal government is not in charge of those things. That's not the kind of thing that the Constitution mandated that the federal government would be created to do. We also mentioned another one of our founders, James Madison. He's very important in understanding our Constitution for many reasons. He wrote a document that we call Federalist 45. If you look at the Federalist Papers, this gives you a lot of understanding. Now, of course, this is all education. This is all like going to school again. But if you want to be smart about your country and be smart about how it's supposed to work, especially with elections coming up, you need to understand what the Constitution allows the federal government to do, what it allows the president to do, the executive, what it allows the legislative to do, the Congress, what it allows the judicial to do, the Supreme Court. So in Federalist 45, James Madison says, the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Notice he didn't say just few they are, few and undefined, because they are specifically enumerated in the Constitution. He says that those which are to remain in the state governments remain. Remain why? Because they started there in 1776. And when the states created the federal government, they delegated a portion of their power to do a job for the states, for them. That's all the federal government was created to do. And Madison goes on and states that the powers which are to remain in the state governments are, in the title of our show tonight, numerous and indefinite. Numerous. The powers which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. And he says the former will be exercised principally on external objects, foreign affairs, war, peace negotiation, foreign commerce, and those types of things. That's what the federal government was to do. So how do we get to a point where our federal government can actually tell its people that we have plenary powers? You know what the word plenary means? Unlimited. It's telling our people that the federal government has told us that it has plenary power, unlimited power. Federal government does not have unlimited power. There are boundaries, there are limits placed on them by the states who created the federal government. We buy that argument coming from the United States government, the federal government. How many people out there do you think would believe it if you said, hey, the United States federal government has more power than the states? You have to do what the federal government says. That is not what the Constitution says. We buy that argument coming from the federal government and those that support that because we don't teach what the word delegate means. That word delegate, it means a temporary trust of responsibility or authority by a higher power to a lower power. When you delegate something to someone, do you, as a, let's say, let's just use extreme examples. Does the janitor of a company delegate responsibility to the CEO? No. Doesn't have that power. He can make requests of the CEO. But the same way, the federal government was created, it is a lesser power than the states because the states delegated certain powers, a temporary trust of responsibility and authority by a higher power to a lower power. The Constitution states that these certain powers will be delegated to the federal government. And there are two very important aspects to delegation. One is that it's temporary. Two, that it comes from a higher power. I'm not talking God higher power, a power that has more authority. And it comes from that higher power to the lower power. And we've just discovered and learned, not through my interpretation of this, but reading the documents themselves, that the states are the higher power and the federal government is the lower power. And the power that the states delegated to that created federal government is temporary. Temporary because it's conditional. You know what conditional means? It's based on conditions. You have this power as long as you do X, Y, Z. And what's the one single purpose for creating government? Can you answer that? Anybody out there have an answer for that? What is the one single purpose for creating government? I'll answer it. It's to secure our rights, not create our rights, secure them. That's the condition, the purpose of the power. We've delegated to you, the federal government, the states have delegated to you to secure our rights. And when you fail to secure our rights, it's our authority of the states to take that power back and do it ourselves. You get that? Do you think the federal government is doing anything to not fulfill its purpose, its inception, to secure our rights? What about the right to free speech? You see, a former president now, they're attempting to prosecute him. They've indicted him on the basis of him expressing his First Amendment rights. And that's the way it's listed in the indictment, by the way, that he said certain things. We'll get into the indictment another day. But you've got right now, even in our country, blatant examples of the federal government not working to secure the rights of people. Censorship. That's against the Constitution if the federal government is behind it. So, which power then reserved to the states, Madison says, the powers reserved to the states, the several states, will extend to all the objects which the ordinary course of affairs concerns the lives of liberties, the properties of the people, the internal order, improvement and prosperity of the state. You see that magic 3 little letter word there? All, it says. Extend to all the objects which the ordinary course of affairs concerns the lives and liberties and properties of the people. So you see, if it's not delegated, it's reserved. And if it's not specifically listed in the Constitution as an authority of the federal government, it's reserved to the states, the originators of the federal government. So what about things like the CDC? How about the EPA? What about the FDA? What about the FFA? Look at all these different 3-letter word. The Bureau of Land Management, BLM. the real BLM. What about the Department of Education? Health and Human Services, USDA, the ATF. What about the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Interior, Department of Ag, FAA, FCC, SEC? Any of these other things you can 3-letter word it. You can string together all of these powers. They are reserved to the states. So how do we get a federal government that's actually exercising power that's not only not delegated to them, but reserved to the states? One simple answer. It's because our states comply. Most of it extortion. Legal extortion, if you will. Political extortion. Now remember, I'm not here giving you my opinion, but we are here to try to work through this. And are you starting to see just a glimmer of why this stuff is so damned important to know? Let's walk through all this reasoning if we can. Reserved means to exercise dominion over a thing. To the exclusion of all others, the power reserved to the states is ownership by the states, right? We know that the word reserve means ownership. It's reserved to the states because they own it. That means the states own that power, which means the states have the right to say no. Can France step into your state and tell you how to run your state? No, because the power is reserved. Let's say you live in Utah. Can Texas come in and tell you how to run your state? No, because that power is reserved to your state as a state. And what we need to understand in this relationship of power being reserved, the federal government is just as much of a foreign power to the states as France or Texas within your state. You get that? The federal government, created by the states, delegated with temporary powers, meaning conditional powers. The federal government has as much power in your state as does France or Germany or England or Ghana or any other country out there. They don't have the power there. That's the relationship of power that's being reserved. The federal government is just as much a foreign power to the states as France or Texas. But if the power is not reserved, if your state does not have the right to say no to the federal government, then you have to accept certain consequences. And these consequences cannot be denied. If your states do not had the authority to say no to France, to Texas, any other governing entity, or the federal government, that means it's not reserved to open to anyone. And if it's not reserved, then you must admit there is no limit to federal power. That the Constitution is actually a farce, and that the federal government can exercise whatever power it damn well wants, and the states simply must comply. So when the state says that the federal government is in power over them, it's because they are complying with that. Now, if that power that belongs to the states is not reserved to the states, and the states must simply do whatever the federal government tells them to do, then you have to admit that the states are not sovereign at all. And if the states aren't sovereign, they're like your 15-year-old. They can't make a legally binding contract, which means the Constitution itself is null and void, which means our federal government exists of its own authority and with unlimited power, which means we do not live in a constitutional republic. We live in an absolute monarchy or an oligarchy with unlimited power to dictate to the people. But here's good news. Our states are sovereign and independent. The Constitution is still a legally binding contract, and the federal government is still legally limited in its authority. And the only thing that has to change is this, because we've been taught the wrong things for a long time. Do you know that our law schools don't actually even teach the Constitution anymore? What they teach is constitutional law, which is different than teaching the Constitution, which sells us lawyers and judges, and eventually the people that judges and lawyers know more about the Constitution than the men who wrote it. That it's irrelevant because it was written so long ago. Guns, the Second Amendment, it's all about muskets and killing squirrels for dinner. They say they know more about the Constitution than the men who wrote it. That it's irrelevant, the Constitution, because it was written so long ago and it can't possibly have meaning today. See, the Constitution is not a statute book that says, oh, you can't drive faster than 75 miles an hour on the interstate. It's a contract of timeless principles that create and define government, period, for a singular purpose. What is that? To secure, and that is to secure our rights. Do you know what's ironic? The Constitution is a contract. Your pundits and think tanks and professors will call it the contract theory or the compact theory. And it's interesting when the people who actually wrote it call it a compact. I don't know how you can call that a theory. The Constitution is only contract in America, where lawyers and judges refuse to apply contract law. Using contract law, there's only one way to apply the Constitution. And this is not the opportunity for think tanks and judges and lawyers and Supreme Court justices to make it up as they go. Along contract law says you must first go back to something we call the meeting of the minds. The meeting of the minds is where the parties to the contract sat down and told us what the contract was supposed to do and how it's supposed to work. That this modern application of interpretation of the Constitution brainwashes the people into believing that the Constitution is not a standard, that it has no meaning, and after all, it's a living, breathing document, and that's contrary to contract law. Teachers tell our kids that the Constitution has no meaning. It's written too old, long ago, the people are dead, can't possibly know what they actually meant or what they were thinking. Heard that all the time, especially in Second Amendment stuff. Oh, we don't know what they were actually thinking when they talked about a militia. Why is that comma there? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what they try to sell us, that bill of goods. Teachers will tell our kids the Constitution has no meaning. So those guys are all old and dead. All the founders, they were just a bunch of old white guys. How much have we heard that argument lately? Because they wrote reams and reams and reams about what they meant. It's just a lie. But I ask the singular question. If the Constitution, which is a contract, is a living, breathing document, would it be okay for us to all sit down with whoever our colleagues might be, anybody we're having a debate with, and go over the contract to see if the parties that resist this looked at the law at all and said, we realize what we meant when we sat down and created your employment contract, but after all, it's a living, breathing document. It doesn't really mean what we meant when we wrote it. It means what we want it to mean now, today. And so they will try to find ways to controvert that law, I meant to say. Because they try to convince you that it doesn't mean the same thing today as it would have meant back then, or their meaning was different. So how do you think that any employee would like their employment contract to be viewed as a living, breathing document? I have hired you on the basis of what you can do and bring to my company, and I will pay you this much money, and here's your benefits. That's the contract. You sign on the dotted line, I'll sign on my dotted line. Unless we want to determine that, oh, that's just a living, breathing document. We can change it at whim. We can say, oh, well, this meant something different on the day that it was signed. It was said by somebody arguing these points, we just simply have to apply some thought and some information and education that we've been denied. And this is how it works. The states are inferior to the people. They are their creator. They are superior to the federal government in reserved powers. If we just simply taught those things, if we taught those things would be necessary, and they'd be so different today. It's a check and balance on power that rests in the hands of the people. And why? The people created the state's governments. So the people are superior to the state's governments. State's government created the federal government, which is inferior to the state's governments. So how do you check that power? And let me remind you that we're talking about a separation of power between the state and the federal government, but we're not really talking about that. We're talking about the principles and the principle of proper governance. So let me do this. We're going to pretend that I've just stolen Grumpy Stack's cars. And while we're pretending, it's a Maserati. So Grumpy Stack, you own a Maserati. And I've just stolen it, a red one. So I've just stolen Grumpy Stack's Maserati. Now, do I have the authority to drive Grumpy's Maserati? No. Do I have the authority to sell Grumpy's Maserati? If I sell it, is it a legally binding sale? No. Because the power over Grumpy Stack's Maserati is never legally delegated to me. That means I have no authority legally over that Maserati. And any act I conduct with that Maserati is null and void. So does Grumpy have to sue me to get his Maserati back? No. He simply has to take the little deed, which is the legal delegation of power over dominion of that property, to the local officials, your sheriff probably. And then the sheriff has to return it to him as the legal owner after slapping me on the wrists or arresting me. So when government uses power that is not delegated to it, it's stealing that power. These are not just simply unconstitutional acts, folks. They're criminal acts because the Constitution is called what? The supreme law of the land. So when the federal government is exercising power that hasn't been delegated to it, it's violating the supreme law of the land. When you violate the law, what are you called? A criminal. And I understand that this is unsettling. This is uncomfortable, but you have to understand it's the government breaking the law, not us. We, the people, who established, no matter what Patrick Henry said, should be we the states, he said. We, the people who formulated the states. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. It says so. It was ratified by all the states that existed. So in the Constitution itself, Article 6, Clause 2, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And now notice it says the Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, are the supreme law of the land. Notice it does not say every law created by Congress is the supreme law of the land. Do you see that? There is a condition, because if it's not made according to the Constitution, then the Constitution cannot be the supreme law of the land. Because you see, the Constitution is supreme without any condition, right? This Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land. But the laws made by Congress are only the supreme law of the land when they are made consistent with the Constitution. Now think about this. If a law can be made that's inconsistent to the Constitution, how can the Constitution be a supreme law if it can't? It can't. You create a paradox, a contradiction. The laws of the United States, which are made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound nearby now, Now, what happens if we grammatically insert some negatives there? Laws of the United States which are not made in pursuance to the Constitution are not the supreme law of the land, which means the judges in every state shall not be bound thereby. What this constitutional document is telling us is that laws created by Congress, executive orders created by a president, opinions created by the Supreme Court that are not made consistent with the Constitution are not binding on the states. Bada boom. I was going to insert the Effenheimer in there, but I decided against it. James Madison, again, says in the case of deliberate, palpable, and dangerous exercise of other powers not granted, the states have the right to interpose. Why do the states have the right to step up and tell the federal government no? It's because they are the creators of the federal government. They are the creators of the Constitution. They know what they created. They know when the federal government is operating outside of its creation. But notice, Madison also says they not only have a right, but they are duty bound. How many of us, realize or will admit that a duty is greater than a right? A right is something you passively have, but a duty implies obligation to act, doesn't it? Why are we duty bound? Because the states created the federal government and we created the states. And the only reason government exists is to secure the rights of the people. And when the federal government is operating outside of its constitutional boundaries, your rights are not secured. So how do we interpose? See that word, interposed? It means to eclipse. And it's the state's authority, the state's right, and the state's duty to step up and say to the federal government, no, you cannot exercise that power in our state because it is not a power that we delegated to you. We must stand and say no. To protect the rights of the people, because that's the only reason that we exist. How do you interpose the several states who form the Constitution? See, I'm not making this shit up. What sovereign and what independent have the unquestionable right to judge of infractions against the Constitution? The states, because they created the Constitution. And that a nullification by those, what sovereigns of all unauthorized acts, is the rightful remedy. What did Jefferson say? The power of the state to check and balance unauthorized authority exercised by the government rests in our power to say no. And if we don't have the authority to say no, then we're not free states. We're not independent if we don't have the authority and the power to say no. Remember, if they're made in pursuance to the Constitution, then they're the supreme law of the land. But if they're not, then we have the right to say no, the power to say no. Alexander Hamilton said this, there is no position which depends on clearer principles than that every act of a what is that delegated authority contrary to the tenor of the commission under which it's exercised. Hope I didn't clunk that up too much there. It's a long way of saying original intent of the Constitution is what matters. If you're not applying the Constitution the way we intended it, the states, then your acts are null and void, federal government. You see, that's why the original intent is the only legal, lawful way to actually apply the Constitution, because it's a contract. That's what they told us. Look at what he says. No legislative act, therefore, contrary to the Constitution, can be valid. Say no. We're expecting the states to say no. Why? Because the states are separate and independent sovereigns. And sometimes they have to act like it. I'm sorry, but I disagree all the time when you need to act like your state governments are supposed to. When we have a problem with that. I disagree with that. States governments are the greatest opponent to the federal government, not their best friends, their coworkers, and on the same payroll. You have to know your state constitution because that's the limit of your state and local authority. And your state constitutions are amazing. They actually do more to enumerate the security of all your rights than even the federal constitution does. Our state constitutions actually have specific language about the security of your inalienable rights that is not in the U.S. Bill of Rights. But we've been brainwashed and we've been tricked. We've been beguiled. We move from one presidential to the next. We never leave a presidential campaign. As soon as the next one's elected, we're starting to elect the next one after that. And so the same with your House of Representatives, the same with your senators. We are constantly and perpetually in a federal election mindset with a singular purpose to distract you from this. Because this is where your power rests, everybody. Legally, do you have more power over your county commissioner, or your U.S. House rep? Your county commissioner. If you do not, it's not legal authority if you don't have power over them. It's an abdication of yours. Do you have more legal authority over your state senator or your U.S. senator? Do you have more authority over your governor or the president of the United States? Do you have more authority over your sheriff or the U.S. attorney general? You see, we've been distracted from where our real power lies. And your pursuit of happiness does not lie in who is elected president of the United States. Your pursuit of happiness, your natural rights, and the security in them actually rests in who is your governor, who is your county commissioner, who is your sheriff. Because we've been distracted from this for so long, those who want the power have moved in. And you're seeing these state and local governments overtaken by Marxists, by socialists, by people who don't believe the Constitution as an ultimate authority in the security of your liberty. They don't even believe in your rights because we've been putting all our time and our money and our effort and all our resources in a federal black hole. Ignoring where our power actually rests and our greatest protection rights. Because you see what we just learned? Who is the higher power? The federal government or the states? The federal government can exercise no unconstitutional law unless your states allow them to do it. If you get control of your state and your local government, you don't care what the federal government is doing because they'll never be allowed to do it in your state unless it's consistent with the Constitution of your state and all the states' constitutions. They all have Bill of Rights. They all have declarations of rights. It's like the U.S. Bill of Rights, but declaring the rights of the people, not just simply the rights of the people, the inalienable rights of the people. All political power is inherent in the people. We created the states. That means all power begins with us, we the people. As the state cannot exercise any greater power than we are lawfully allowed to exercise as an individual. So what obligation do you have to submit yourself to an authority asserted that has no legal authority? Just this one that you rationalize in your mind. The only reason we submit to unlawful authority is number one, we've been trained to do so. Number two, we're too comfortable to do anything else outside our comfort zone. Or number three, we're afraid to say anything. But we need to understand the authority that we possess. that we as people possess. As the ultimate check and balance rests in peaceful non-compliance of unconstitutional acts. Null and void. We shall not comply. We must know that. We must believe that we must enforce that right of non-compliance. Sam Adams said, "It's a serious consideration that should weigh heavy upon our hearts, that ages and millions yet unborn will be the miserable sharers of our experience when we comply with unlawful authority. We give that unlawful authority, we give it power, not just over ourselves, but over future generations, that we create a mental precedent that says, well, we've been doing this that way forever, so it must be okay." Which means our children are going to grow up believing that this stolen authority is actual lawful authority. Remember, I stole Grumpy Stack's Maserati, right? So let's pretend that I knew when Grumpy and his wife were going on vacation, and I knew that they were going to the Bahamas for 3 weeks. And the day they jumped on the plane, I stole Grumpy's Maserati, his red one, because he has several. I drove around for 3 weeks. Everybody who saw me driving Grumpy's car assumed that I had legal authority to do so, but I stole it. Do I have the right and the legal authority? So Grumpy and his wife come back from vacation, tan, relaxed, happy. And they notice the red Maserati is gone. And I've been driving it for 3 weeks. Does Grumpy have to say, "Oh, well, you know, it's been there 3 weeks. I guess they own it now"? No! What does Grumpy have the right to do? He has the right to take it back. You see, in law, we have these two things assumed: authority and legal authority. Assumed never becomes legal authority without a transfer of legal authority. You know what? We're at the end of the show for the radio audience. I have to bid you a bit of a farewell. So stick around for a little bit of the Captain's Cabin, and we'll be back. So live long and prosper, radio audience. And we'll see you next time. If I hit the right button. Boom.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Well, and welcome back to the captain's cabin. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the after show, the post show. If you have not been here before, that is what this portion of the show is every night. After the show, we do the captain's cabin, which is where we will let our hair down a little bit and we talk a little bit more freely. We sometimes have callers. Of course, since I've started the Patreon, and we don't have quite as many people that come in to call the captain's cabin, so we make it short and sweet. We don't have Uncle Dave here anymore, so we don't have Uncle Dave calling into the captain's cabin. So I so as of tonight, if there's nobody that calls in for the captain's cabin in the next few minutes, we're just gonna let it go. I'm a little. I'll be very honest with those of you who are listening. I'm a little put out by all my friends and loyal listeners who love this show but don't want to come and help support it. It That's why we're short of people. And that's why I open it up to the public on some shows, because I want to get that audience in here, let them know we're still around. There's that fine tightrope I walk between saying, look, we're in a new paradigm. I have to do something that helps this show build itself and generate a little bit of revenue. Like I said, I told you yesterday, I got $58 in my account from Patreon this month. So that's what this show earned me in a month. And that's all right. It'd be nice if it was 58,000 a month, and some shows do that. But the fine line is, say, I love all my listeners, and I'm so glad that you're here when we do the public shows. I just wish those same listeners found it valuable enough, like those of you who are here have found it valuable enough to stick $4 to $10 in every month. Yeah, it's like a subscription almost when you think about it. But when I think about it, if I've got a friend who, and I've used this analogy so much with this, I want to buy him a cup of coffee. Buy him a cup of coffee. If I had to buy a friend a cup of coffee once a month because I voluntarily obligated myself to that, I'd do it. But if it's an obligation, don't do it. If it's a thing that you do because you enjoy this place, I'm so thankful that you do it. I'm just a little bit chagrined that more of the people who have loved this show in its free format have stayed away from making it a $4 thing for them. Now, is that tasteless for me to say that? Oh, you shouldn't talk about that stuff. Can't talk about that. Well, sure I can. But I can talk about that all I want. It's my show. And if somebody doesn't like the fact I say that, they don't have to listen anymore. Yeah, Randall Flagg, I just see your comment. You're confused too that most of the regulars aren't here. And we've got some regulars who have signed up and haven't made it in to any of the shows. Just because, and those are the people that support everything this show does. Even when they can't be here because of the summer months, they're doing a lot of travel, a lot of visitors, stuff like that. They can't always be here. They listen to it later, but they can't be here live. And that's okay. And it's all okay. It really comes down to, I have to say, it's okay that my friends and supporters can't throw a few bucks in every month to this show. But I'm seeing it myopically. I see it from my side of the aisle, so to speak. I see it from somebody who, for many years, has given hours and hours and hours and hours of time every week to doing shows on this and keeping people entertained, informed, making friends, chatting with them, talking with them when they call into the show. And as soon as you put a price tag on it, hey, I'll do 30 shows a month for you or more for minimum of $4 a month. And then those same loyal listeners disappear until you do another free show. Then they're all there. It chagrins me a little bit. And I'm only talking because there's only a handful of you here that are watching this, that are members of the Patreon channel. And those of you who are members here, you've already done that. And I appreciate it more than you can know. You know what that $58 did? It filled my gas tank. You know, if it was 10 times that amount, 580, probably buy a new webcam to broadcast the show. Upgrade my soundboard or my microphone. This microphone here, I've had this microphone for 8 years, maybe 9. Needs upgrading, but it works. It works fine now. That's what the purpose is of doing a show that generates revenue stream. And there's part of me that says, maybe I'm just not that good. Maybe I don't do a good show. Maybe there's too much other free stuff out there that my show takes the back seat when I ask for a couple of bucks. And those of you who have done it, I know Randall, you have, and Barbie D, you have too. That means so much to me that you did that. You don't have to put your money here. I appreciate the fact that you did. And that's why it gets quiet during Captain's Cabin Hour, unless I'm publishing a public show, which I'll probably do again this Friday. I try to do at least one show a week where we go out publicly on the airwaves. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say airwaves. I meant to say YouTube. So, yeah, there's that. That's just me to you, those of you who are here. It bothers me a little bit, but that's okay. I think it, and I don't thrive off of this kind of stuff, but it makes me wonder what my value is. If I can be easily pushed aside, if I say, hey, look, we got a thing set for $4 a month. If you come in, I'll do 3 shows a week plus. And so anyway, there you go. That's just me saying my thing, doing my piece. My wife's not even a member. She doesn't have to be. She can walk right down here and sit in that chair over there and distract me while I'm doing radio. So, but there it is. There's a show. I hope this stuff on the Constitution is valuable to you. I don't know if you see the same intrinsic value that I do in talking about this stuff, because there's stuff in here, even new revelations to me as I've been researching this stuff. It's new. It's new, but it's old. This is stuff we all should know already. And my state's constitution, I don't know much about the Wisconsin state constitution. I live here. I need to brush up on that. And should everybody be a constitutional scholar? No. But everybody should have an idea of what their constitution is supposed to do. Now, first of all, I'm talking about the federal constitution, the one that is established by the states, the federal government. Then we should know what our states' constitutions do to a certain degree. It's boring, dry reading to sit down and I'm going to go, what are we going to do tonight, honey? We're going to read our state constitution. That's about as exciting for me as, stepping on Legos in the middle of the night. But it's necessary. It'd be good that we all know these things, because that helps us when we want to say, no, you can't do that. And our government has come to a place where, our federal government, to a place where, do you ever get the feeling that the federal government thinks that we have to do what they tell us to do? And I think we do within certain confines. They have to be, as I made the point I made tonight, laws that are legally made within the confines of the Constitution. Thank you, Barbie D. I know you do. And I hope I don't sound like I'm whining. I don't want to be whining about it. It's just a few of us here that are members. And that's what makes me, I'm only stating what I stated not because I'm whining or caterwauling about it, but I'm curious as to why. It's like when I was working with Taps Para magazine, the Ghost Hunters official magazine, back 12 years ago now. More than that, 15 years ago now. When I was working with them, and I decided to step off from that and start my own magazine, Intrepid magazine, which was the precursor to Intrepid radio. And as a matter of fact, they overlapped each other. Intrepid radio became the radio voice of Intrepid magazine. Same stuff: politics, science, paranormal, mysteries, archaeology, history, all that kind of stuff. And in a magazine form. And I published for 3 years. And then it got to be a little too overwhelming, so I stopped doing it. And I don't want to say overwhelming. It was just one of those things where I had so much going on, I just couldn't dedicate enough time to it. But when I started Intrepid, I asked how many here of my, at the time, about 10,000 followers between, now granted, many of them overlapped, between Facebook and Instagram and all the social media, my Twitter page and all that, close to 10,000 people. And I had thousands of people that said, "Oh, you're going to launch a new magazine? Sign me up. Where do I sign up?" I said, "Well, we're going to start subscriptions in a few weeks. Get this thing rolling. Get some subscriptions built up before we start publishing." Heard that over and over again. We are so excited for Intrepid magazine. Want to subscribe. Do you know how many out of those nearly 10,000 social media followers actually signed up for a subscription? 12. 12 people. And I'll always remember that. That was the first time I was disillusioned with the marketing capability of social media. And the first realization I really had that people will pay you a lot of lip service, maybe especially when it comes to money. I don't know. So I've had several things like that that have happened. Some of it is we don't have the marketing apparatus in place. That's something I need to work on. And try to find a way to, but of course, marketing apparatus, what does that equate to? Having money to have a marketing apparatus. So it's the great catch-22. So we go slowly. We're going slowly. Hopefully we'll see this thing build. And there will be a point probably when I would say, this is not going to make it. So we just might not do it. I mean, I could do it for free for the rest of my life, for certain. I might come back to a show a week or something like that, if that were the case. But in the meantime, we're gonna keep plugging away at this and keep spreading the word that we have a show, that the show is over on Patreon. The show is part of how I earn my living, or I would like it to be, so I can do the best job I can do for you. And Randall Flagg, I agree with your comment. We need a convention of states to get things done right again. And there's a convention of states that's going on. They're trying to, I follow it loosely. I need to follow it more tightly. And so, Barbie D, I love and appreciate you. Thank you again for that. And so right now, in the meantime, we're going to call it quits. Sorry if I whined a little too much. That's just me. Just me thinking out loud, wondering out loud, pondering out loud. You're my close-knit audience because you're here. So I shared that with you. And those are the things you think about when you put a lot of time and effort into something and everybody says they love you, and then you only get a small percentage of those people that actually say, yeah, I'll buy you a cup of coffee once a month. And you say, why is that happening that way? Is it me? Am I doing something wrong? Am I not good enough? Am I not? It plays into all that. So that's just the way it works over here. So I want you to not at all feel like I don't appreciate you or that I'm complaining or caterwauling about who's not here. Just mentioning it to you guys. And I appreciate you being here and doing this. And I'm going to keep doing it for you guys because I appreciate what you're doing. And I'll keep working on trying to grow it. We'll see if we can get more people to come over. I think one of the things, too, everybody's tight right now. I get that. At the same time, everybody has a million different places asking for their $4. So it could be that, too. There's only a few people whose shows I pay for. I pay for some radio shows. I pay for Amy Bruni's Haunted Roads. If you go over to check out her here, I can tell you right here who I listen to and who I pay for. Amy Bruni doesn't charge anything, so I guess I don't pay for her. What do I pay for in here, though? I pay for not Amy Bruni's Haunted Roads. That was a sorry about that. I didn't mean to falsely advertise her. She doesn't charge for her show. Called Haunted Roads. It's just a radio show. There's no video with it. Good show. You should go pick it up. Haunted Roads. Find out where you can hear that podcast. I also like What's Up Weirdo. I don't pay for that one, but that's John Tenney. And she would kill me if she was listening. I can't think of her name. It's trying to get her name on the tip of my head. Jessica Napick. They do a podcast and it's wildly popular. John Tenney, if you don't know him, kind of balding on top and wears a rumply looking trench coat and a white shirt and a thin tie. And he does some paranormal investigating on TV. He's had his own show. He does it with Amy Bruni and their show, Kindred Spirits. And they're really fun to listen to. They're a little coarse if you have delicate sensibilities when it comes to language, but they're fun to listen to. I like them. One that I pay for is Mind Seed. I watch their show for free on and get this, all their stuff is free. I can watch on YouTube. I watch all their episodes. Great paranormal investigative group. Couple of guys, and they're really very good. And their evidences they pick up are astonishing. But all their stuff is free. But I go over and I give $10 a month to their show. Why? Because I appreciate them and I find them fantastic. And I want to see them keep going. So, and they're doing all right. As a result, they have great revenue coming in. So those are the kinds of things that I will pay for. And if I look at it, if I step back and go, well, let's see, I make $58 this last month, and about 15 of that has gone out for shows I've listened to that I pay for. Amy Bruni is not one of them. Hers is free. Same with Tenney and Napick's show. What's Up Weirdo? So fun stuff, though, and fun broadcasting. And I love doing this. So don't ever misinterpret what I say as me not loving what I do. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't. It's certainly not for the money. Not yet. I wouldn't mind being one of those Patreon channels that have 27,000 listeners every week and they haul in $4 a person on that. You can do the math. That'd be kind of a nice change of events, wouldn't it? So there you go. So that's all I got to say. I don't even know if everybody's still here, but I think it's about time for me to get out of here. How about that? Love you all. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to my griping. I may end up editing that out of this program. No, not everybody needs to hear it when they come in here and listen to this show. And so that was between us who are sitting here. So we'll see what happens. I'll maybe cut the captain's cabin out of this one. We'll see what happens. See how I feel about it. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for giving me your time. And we'll see you next time, which will be tomorrow, actually, a public show on YouTube with Wendy Robertson and I, Robertson. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. London time. And that will be tomorrow. But it all depends on how she's doing tomorrow. She went in either today or tomorrow for a procedure, or it's Wednesday. I can't remember. Might be the day after tomorrow. I'll have to contact her tomorrow morning. So, at any rate, everybody, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Love you. Live long and prosper.